At 62, Margaret stood inside the house she had spent 30 years trying to afford. The house was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, a spotless kitchen, a wide living room with expensive furniture nobody used. And yet, as Margaret stood alone in the middle of it that Friday evening, she began to cry. Not because she had lost everything, because she had gotten everything she thought she wanted. And suddenly, she couldn't remember when she had started wanting it. Margaret had always been the kind of woman people admired. At 22, she was ambitious. At 28, she had a good job. By 35, she was managing a department. At 43, she had the house, the car, the promotions, and the carefully planned life everyone told her she should be proud of. But there was something nobody knew. Every morning, before leaving for work, Margaret would stand in front of her bedroom mirror and quietly ask herself the same question. Is this really my life? Then she would put on her coat and go. Because Margaret had learned something early. Being successful was easier than admitting you wanted something different. She grew up in a small town in Ohio with parents who believed stability was the safest kind of happiness. Her father used to tell her, "Get a good job, work hard, buy a house, then you'll be secure." Margaret listened. She became good at doing what was expected. In college, she studied business because it was practical, even though she secretly loved photography. When her friends went traveling, she stayed home to save money. When she wanted to take a year off, she told herself she couldn't afford it. When her boyfriend, Daniel, asked her to move across the country with him and build a simpler life, she said no. "I can't throw away everything I've worked for," she told him. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Margaret," he said, "what if you're working so hard for a life you don't even want?" She laughed. At the time, the question sounded ridiculous. Years later, she would remember every word. Margaret kept climbing. Promotion after promotion. Longer hours, bigger responsibilities. Her salary grew, but so did her list of things she was supposed to want. A larger house, a newer car, better furniture, more impressive vacations. She rarely asked whether these things made her happy. She only asked whether they proved she was doing well. Then at 47, something happened. Margaret finally got the promotion she had spent 10 years chasing. Her co-workers applauded. Her boss shook her hand. Someone brought a cake into the office. That evening, she drove home expecting to feel proud. Instead, she sat in her parked car for nearly 20 minutes. She couldn't make herself walk inside. Her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. They hadn't spoken in years. He had seen the announcement about her promotion. "Congratulations," his message said. Then another message appeared. "I hope you're happy." Margaret stared at those 4 words. She didn't reply. The next morning, she went back to work, and that became the pattern. Whenever something inside her became uncomfortable, she worked harder. Whenever she felt empty, she bought something. Whenever she wondered about the life she had abandoned, she reminded herself that successful people didn't complain. But time kept moving. At 52, her mother became sick. Margaret began making frequent trips home to Ohio. One evening, while sitting beside her mother's bed, she noticed an old photograph on the dresser. It showed Margaret at 19. She was standing beside a battered camera, smiling at the ocean. Her mother looked at the photograph and smiled. "You used to love taking pictures." Margaret laughed softly. "I guess I grew up." Her mother looked at her. "No," she said. "You got busy." Margaret didn't know what to say. Her mother reached for her hand. You always thought life would begin after the next thing. The next promotion, the next house, the next raise, the next vacation, the next year. But Margaret, her mother whispered, there's always a next thing. Her mother died 3 months later, and for the first time, Margaret realized something frightening. She had spent decades preparing to live, but she had barely lived. Still, she didn't change immediately. That is the part people rarely talk about. Understanding the truth doesn't automatically give you the courage to act on it. Margaret returned to work. She continued paying the mortgage. She continued attending meetings. She continued living the life she had built. Until one Monday morning, her doctor told her she needed to slow down. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. You need to make some changes, he said. Margaret nodded. She had heard that sentence before, but this time she went home and sat at her kitchen table. For hours she stared at the room around her, the expensive table, the unused dining chairs, the perfect curtains. Everything represented years of sacrifice. And suddenly she wondered, what exactly did I sacrifice it for? That question broke something open. Not dramatically. There was no music, no miracle. Just a woman sitting alone in a quiet house, finally admitting that she had confused achievement with fulfillment. The next morning, Margaret did something small. She took her old camera out of the closet. The battery was dead. She charged it. Then she drove to a nearby park. She didn't take photographs for money. She didn't post them online. She didn't tell anyone. She simply walked and took pictures. The first few felt strange, almost embarrassing, but she kept going. A few weeks later, she joined a local photography group. She started leaving work on time. She stopped buying things simply because they made her look successful. She called old friends. She even contacted Daniel. They talked for nearly 2 hours. There was no dramatic reunion, no attempt to rewrite the past. Just two older people, remembering who they had once been. Margaret's life did not suddenly become perfect. She still had bills. She still had responsibilities. She still had difficult days. But something had changed. For the first time, her decisions began coming from a question she had ignored for most of her life. Do I actually want this? Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes it was no. And finally, she allowed herself to accept both. At 62, Margaret sold the house. People thought she was making a mistake. Her co-workers were confused. Some friends told her she was going backward, but Margaret wasn't going backward. She was finally going towards something. She moved into a smaller apartment near the lake. It wasn't impressive. There was no giant kitchen, no expensive furniture, no reason for anyone to envy her. But every morning, Margaret opened the window, picked up her camera, and walked outside. One afternoon, she photographed an old man sitting beside the water. He noticed her and smiled. Beautiful day, isn't it? Margaret lowered the camera. Yeah, she said. Then she smiled. Actually, it really is. For years, Margaret had believed the goal of life was to build something impressive enough that other people would call it successful. She finally understood that a life can look successful from the outside and still feel completely wrong from within. The tragedy wasn't that Margaret had worked hard. The tragedy was that she had spent so many years asking, how can I become successful? Instead of asking the question that mattered more. What kind of life is worth being successful at? Because you can spend 20 years climbing a ladder only to discover that you placed it against the wrong wall. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't climbing higher. It's stopping long enough to look around and decide whether you still want to be there. Margaret had spent most of her life chasing a life she didn't want, but she didn't spend the rest of it doing the same thing. And perhaps that is the real warning in her story. You don't have to destroy your life and start over. You don't have to quit everything tomorrow. You may only need to pause. Look honestly at the life you're building and ask yourself one question before another year disappears. If nobody were watching, would I still choose this life? Sometimes the answer will be yes. But if it isn't, don't wait until you are 62 to listen. Have you ever been so focused on building the life you're supposed to want that you forgot to ask yourself what you actually want? Margaret spent years chasing promotions, money, and a beautiful house. From the outside, her life looked successful. But inside, she felt like something was missing. The truth is, a better life doesn't usually begin with one huge decision. It begins with the small decisions you make every day. That's why I created the 30-Day Discipline Workbook, a simple digital workbook designed to help you take intentional action, build better habits, stay consistent, and reflect on your progress, one day at a time. If you're ready to stop drifting and start being more intentional with your days, you can get the workbook through the link in the description. I've also pinned the link in the comments so you can find it easily. Don't wait years to realize you were living on autopilot. Start with 30 days. Your next chapter can begin with one decision.